I am Gracie Alexander, 32, a New York City tour guide and morning barista. This was my life. My twin brother Ethan, the corporate shark, stood before me. He paid for his espresso, took his change, and then, with a venomous smirk, he tossed a single, clattering 50-cent piece onto the counter. "Keep the change, little sis. You look like you need it more than I do." My humiliation was absolute, watched by every customer. Latent fury ignited. But that coin? That coin was the trigger for a calculated revenge that would cost him far more than 50 cents. That little coin Ethan threw? It landed right next to the framed photograph of Harold Miller, my grandfather, the heart and soul of this place, Golden Mornings. The cafe isn't just a business, it's an institution, filled with the calm, grounded routine he built over 4 decades. He's 78 now, and after his entire staff quit a few months ago, I stepped in. I couldn't let his legacy, or him, fall apart. Part of the legacy. I worked the dawn shift here before my afternoon tours. The espresso machine is my first office, the city streets are my second. This routine isn't a chore, it's my act of devotion to the only person who ever saw my worth. My hands might be busy cleaning counters and pouring coffee, but my mind is focused on preserving the stability that Ethan desperately wants to disrupt. What secret was hidden inside this seemingly simple cafe? People only saw me as the waitress or the tour guide. They didn't see the dual shifts, the quiet exhaustion that comes with serving coffee by dawn and navigating tourist crowds by day. My world is grit, responsibility, and the discipline of showing up. Ethan's world? It's tailored ambition, cold power, and only showing up to claim what he thinks is owed. That difference is the core fracture in our family. Grit versus power. I embraced the sacrifice of working 2 jobs to protect the one man who cared. I symbolize devotion, Ethan symbolizes entitlement. He's the one our parents always praised, the one groomed for success. I was the responsible twin, the invisible backbone. I am the low-level employee. He is the high-level threat. I didn't need their praise, but I needed to protect my grandfather from his son, and my brother. Entitlement versus devotion. This quiet determination was my armor. But Ethan's daily mockery was more than just a power trip, it was a distraction. He was studying the terrain, assessing the value of the very place he mocked. What was Ethan really searching for inside Golden Mornings, and how high was the price of his corporate ambition? Every morning was a predictable assault. Ethan would roll up in his black, tailored SUV, a clear demonstration of the life I supposedly failed to achieve. He wore suits that screamed Wall Street, and I wore a caffeine-stained apron. He'd barely glance at me, but his presence alone was a heavy weight. His morning coffee run wasn't about caffeine, it was about psychological warfare. Psychological warfare. He'd order, not ask, with a sneer reserved for what he deemed beneath him. "Make it quick, Gracie. Some of us have millions of dollars waiting." That sentence was the daily liturgy of our rivalry. I'd nod, avoiding eye contact, channeling my frustration into perfectly steamed milk. This daily ritual was exhausting. How much longer could I maintain my silence? His mockery wasn't just in the tip, it was in the words, designed to dismantle my dignity publicly. He'd take a call right at the counter, mentioning millions and mergers. Then, he'd glance at me with that venomous smirk and say, "Still serving coffee, huh?" Some people just never move up. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of my failure. Every word was a calculated dig, aimed to remind the whole cafe that I was his low-level sister. Calculated verbal assault. I stayed silent, refusing to give him the escalation he desperately wanted. I polished the counter, focusing on the shine. Golden Mornings was my sanctuary, but Ethan turned it into a quiet battlefield. The humiliation was a sharp, bitter taste, but I wouldn't cry. I channeled that raw pain into discipline. Ethan thought my silence was weakness, but it was the steel trap protecting my true objective. What was Gracie's true objective beneath the apron? His mockery wasn't just in the tip, it was in the words, designed to dismantle my dignity publicly. He'd take a call right at the counter, mentioning millions and mergers. Then, he'd glance at me with that venomous smirk and say, "Still serving coffee, huh?" Some people just never move up. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of my failure. Every word was a calculated dig, aimed to remind the whole cafe that I was his low-level sister. Calculated verbal assault. I stayed silent, refusing to give him the escalation he desperately wanted. I polished the counter, focusing on the shine. Golden Mornings was my sanctuary, but Ethan turned it into a quiet battlefield. The humiliation was a sharp, bitter taste, but I wouldn't cry. I channeled that raw pain into discipline. Ethan thought my silence was weakness, but it was the steel trap protecting my true objective. What was Gracie's true objective beneath the apron? My quiet efforts started paying dividends. One Tuesday morning, a prominent food blogger published a glowing review. It praised the cafe's warmth, discipline, and the incredible personal touch, all the things I'd poured my energy into. Grandpa Harold beamed, his face alight with pride. "Look, Gracie. They recognize the goodness you bring." For a brief moment, the exhaustion was worth it. This was the proof that devotion mattered more than dollars. Devotion proves worth. Of course, Ethan had to be there for the emotional crash. He sauntered over, glanced at the headline, and dismissed the entire achievement with a wave of his hand. "It's just luck, Grandpa. These bloggers are random. It's not talent or a scalable business strategy." He implied that my entire contribution was a fluke, a childish distraction from his real corporate vision. Harold immediately defended me, but Ethan's words cut deeper than any insult. Luck versus talent. I immediately turned and furiously wiped the counter, forcing myself not to look at them. The sting of injustice was intense. Harold placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, but I couldn't speak, I just scrubbed harder. Ethan's objective was clear, he wouldn't let me claim any win, big or small. But this denial only solidified my resolve. If he wouldn't acknowledge my work, I'd make him face the consequences of his own. What financial secrets was Ethan hoping to exploit next? The day after Ethan dismissed the review, Grandpa Harold pulled me aside. His voice was low, laced with unease. He was usually open, but now he was whispering. He told me Ethan had been asking detailed questions, not about his health, but about the business. He asked about the daily cash flow, Gracie, the cafe's debt structure, and, worst of all, the property's market value. Ethan's disdain was a mask. This wasn't about coffee, it was a hostile financial inquiry. Financial inquiry. The shock hit me hard. I realized Ethan wasn't mocking my service, he was assessing the asset. Every time he insulted my low-level job, he was secretly calculating his potential profit margin. His scorn was a smokescreen for his greed. Harold saw the shift, too. He's not interested in the golden mornings, Gracie. He's interested in the golden property. The cafe, our home, was suddenly a target on Ethan's corporate balance sheet. Greed is the objective. Ethan wasn't just interested in the property, he was planning a hostile takeover of my grandfather's life. If the physical assets were valuable, what was the true, untold value of the Golden Mornings legacy, and how would Ethan try to seize it? Ethan didn't stop at merely asking questions. He started visiting Grandpa at home, bringing documents and wearing his corporate mask of concern. He framed his entire hostile inquiry as protecting Grandpa's retirement. His sweet, concerned tone was far more unsettling than his insults. "We just need to optimize your assets, Harold," he'd coo, implying my grandfather was too old and simple to manage his own money. I saw right through the manipulation, it was a power move disguised as care. Mask of false concern. I could see the manipulation taking its toll on Harold. He trusted Ethan because he was family and a lawyer. Ethan leveraged that trust, subtly eroding Harold's confidence in his own business acumen. "It's just about mitigating legal risk, Grandpa," Ethan would insist, always talking in corporate jargon designed to confuse an old man. My brother wasn't just after the land, he was after the transfer of authority. I was the only one who saw the fine print on his soul, but I had no legal standing to intervene. Leveraging family trust. The cafe, the symbol of my devotion, was now the prize in Ethan's corporate game. He wasn't just playing, he was preparing to close the deal. How could I possibly fight a corporate shark armed with a law degree when all I had was an apron and a desire to protect my grandpa? The corporate threat from Ethan wasn't the only ticking clock. I noticed it first when Grandpa Harold was pouring the morning brew. His hands, usually so steady after decades of perfecting the art, started to tremble noticeably. He spilled a little coffee. He laughed it off, "Just getting old, Gracie. The body depreciates faster than the equipment." But I didn't laugh. The laughter was a defense mechanism. The truth was a chilling liability on our balance sheet. Body depreciation. I began covering his more demanding tasks, hoping no one else, especially Ethan, would notice the shift in his capacity. The shadows of aging were growing heavier. He'd forget a regular's order or mix up a cash transaction. Each small lapse was a painful reminder that our time was a finite resource, an asset rapidly liquidating. I saw the fear in his eyes, but he kept dismissing it with a gentle pat on my hand. I knew my duty had gone beyond espresso. Time is liquidating. Ethan's pressure wasn't helping. Every time Harold had to explain his choices to his corporate son, the strain showed. I often saw him staring at the legal documents Ethan left, a silent plea for help in his eyes. He couldn't openly say he was scared of his son, but his body language screamed it. The emotional stress was becoming a measurable health deficit. He was the only family I had left, and the thought of losing him, and the cafe, to Ethan's greed was unbearable. Measurable health deficit. His decline put everything into sharp focus. My slow, quiet strategy against Ethan suddenly felt dangerously inefficient. I had to speed up my learning curve. I spent my nights deep diving into accounting rules and property law, driven by the fear that Ethan would force Harold into signing something irreversible. I had to turn my love into legal and financial armor, and I had to do it now. The timer was counting down, not to an acquisition, but potentially to a tragedy. Love becomes legal armor. Every cup of coffee I poured for Harold felt precious, like time itself was leaking away. The stakes were no longer just the cafe's ownership, they were Harold's peace and survival. I knew Ethan was preparing his final documents. How close was he to trapping Harold legally, and what extreme measure would I have to take to save the man who saved me? The pressure campaign reached its peak when my parents joined the fray. They arrived not as mediators, but as Ethan's silent partners. Their presence legitimized his greed. They'd sit Harold down, all smiles and false concern. "Harold, darling, you need to be realistic," my mother would coo. The air was thick with the pretense of love, but I knew their only concern was accessing wealth, not ensuring Harold's happiness or peace. Parents joined the greed. Their key argument was always the same, a cold, corporate mantra: Ethan knows business. They stressed that Harold needed professional legal advice, meaning Ethan's, to protect the cafe's value. "Gracie is sweet, Harold, but she's just a waitress. Ethan's a lawyer." That phrase, "just a waitress," was their ultimate dismissal of my dedication. They turned my sacrifice into a weakness and Ethan's exploitation into competence. Competence versus devotion. The ultimate goal was to coerce Harold into signing the legal documents Ethan prepared, documents that would likely transfer control to Ethan. My parents relentlessly pressured Harold to let Ethan handle it, assuring him it was for his own good. Harold looked lost, caught between his love for the cafe and the weight of his family's judgment. I was cornered, an unwilling witness to my family's betrayal. If I spoke up, I'd confirm their narrative that I was emotional and unstable. Unwilling witness. I stayed quiet, swallowing the bile of injustice. The worst betrayal wasn't Ethan's greed, it was my parents validating it. I finally had to walk away, retreating to the relative safety of the kitchen. My quiet resolve became a shield, protecting the plan I knew I had to execute alone. I knew then that Ethan's strategy had won the initial family battle. He thought he won the war. He was wrong. Alone in the fight. The family pressure confirmed my need for secrecy. If they all believed Ethan was the only one who knew business, they would never help me. Harold was running out of time, and the documents were waiting for his signature. The only way to win was to become the expert they denied, to find the secret lever that would undo Ethan's legal chokehold. What was the first step Gracie took to fight the corporate shark? The night I walked away from my parents' betrayal, I made a choice. I wouldn't be the victim anymore. If they all believed the waitress couldn't handle business, then the waitress would become the expert. I locked myself in golden mornings after closing, transforming the cafe from a sanctuary into a war room. I swapped my apron for business books and legal guides. Ethan used his degree to exploit, I would use the truth to expose. Waitress becomes expert. I pored over the cafe's aging financial records, desperately trying to decipher the jargon Ethan spoke so easily. Assets, liabilities, equity, property covenants, it was a foreign language designed to intimidate outsiders. I forced myself to understand every term. I knew that legal vulnerability was Harold's only weakness, and that knowledge was Ethan's only weapon. I had to disarm him by becoming fluent in his own language. Disarming the lawyer. I wasn't just learning, I was hunting. I looked for the weak spots in Ethan's financial armor, the assumptions he made about our low-level understanding. I started noticing discrepancies in the property tax payments and a few odd, decades-old investments listed under Ruth's account. Ruth was my grandmother. Ethan hadn't accounted for those details. He was too arrogant to check the small print. This was my advantage. Ruth's account clue. My motivation shifted from simple revenge to absolute protection. I knew I was working against my own parents and a predatory lawyer twin, but none of that mattered. My true family was Harold, and this cafe was his life's monument. I made a silent promise. I would protect this legacy and him, even if it meant sacrificing every other relationship I had. My determination was quiet, but it was absolute. Absolute protection. By the time the first customer arrived, I was no longer just Gracie the waitress. I was Gracie the strategist, the financial apprentice. I had earned an inner resolve that no amount of Ethan's mockery could touch. The knowledge was my shield. I understood the language of money now. And that understanding gave me a power he never anticipated. I was ready to play his game, on my terms. Strategist is born. Ethan thought he was leveraging my quiet nature for his quick win. But he underestimated the strength of a woman fighting for the only man who ever truly supported her. I had the facts, I had the determination, and soon, I would have the proof. What shocking secret had Harold been hiding for decades, and how would it completely dismantle Ethan's corporate plan? I knew the answer wasn't in the clean, modern ledgers. It had to be buried in the past, where Ethan's corporate laser eyes wouldn't look. I spent hours in the dusty back storage room, pulling out decades of Grandpa's disorganized files. Then, wedged behind a bag of stale coffee beans, I found it, a small, heavy, leather-bound ledger dated before Ethan was even born. It was labeled simply, Ruth's account. Ledger of secrets found. Inside, the handwriting was Grandma Ruth's. The details were stunning. Ruth hadn't just helped run the cafe, she had legally established a blind trust decades ago, naming Harold as the lifetime beneficiary and making the cafe property the central asset. This wasn't a simple business Harold owned. It was a complex family trust. The ultimate purpose was clear, to protect the property from being sold outside the family line or from being easily seized. Blind trust revealed. Ethan, the corporate lawyer, had missed it entirely. His entire financial inquiry was based on the false assumption that Harold held direct ownership. He never looked for the trust because he never expected a simple waitress's grandmother to be that financially savvy. His arrogance was my secret weapon. The legal documents Ethan had forced Harold to consider were worthless against the provisions of Ruth's trust. The shock of this realization was euphoric. Arrogance is fatal. As I closed the ledger, a small, tarnished brass key fell onto the counter. It was taped inside the back cover, with a single, handwritten note attached, Safety Deposit Box 4B, Central Bank. This wasn't just a document trail, this was Grandma Ruth's final contingency plan. The key likely contained the original, signed, and legally binding trust documents, the proof that would instantly invalidate Ethan's claims. My heart pounded. I had the lever now. Final contingency key. I knew what I had to do. Ethan had scheduled his final meeting with Harold for tomorrow morning, the moment he planned to seize control. I didn't have a law degree, but I had a secret legal weapon crafted by my grandmother decades ago. My quiet revenge wouldn't be dramatic, it would be devastatingly legal. What epic public humiliation was Gracie about to unleash on her corporate twin brother? The morning of the confrontation, the cafe was quiet, bathed in the soft, golden light I knew I had to fight for. I made Harold's usual, a simple, perfect black coffee. I needed him to be strong for the day ahead, but I couldn't tell him why. This was our final moment of peace, our silent communion. He smiled, appreciating the warmth. I looked at his kind, worn face, realizing that the value of golden mornings wasn't in the property value, it was in Harold's life and his happiness. Value is in happiness. I knew Harold felt defeated by the family's pressure. I squeezed his hand, a silent message of unwavering support. I looked him in the eye, letting him see my inner resolve. "Grandpa," I said, my voice steady, "no one, absolutely no one, is going to take this from you. No lawyer, no parent, no amount of money." I didn't mention the trust, but I needed him to rely on my certainty. His small, hesitant nod was all the permission I needed to proceed with the legal ambush. Certainty is strength. I helped Harold straighten his apron, a small, ritualistic act of devotion. "Ethan will try to confuse you today. He will use big words and threats. Just remember one thing, you do not sign anything. Not a single page. Wait for me." He looked surprised, but saw the fire in my eyes. He whispered, "I trust you, Gracie. You've always been the honest one." That declaration of trust, that raw, simple faith, was my final call to action. I couldn't fail him. Trust in the wait. I had already secured the evidence from the safety deposit box. The original trust documents were tucked safely away, my legal trump card. I felt the cold, hard reality of the brass key against my palm. This key, and the secret it held, was the only thing that stood between Harold and total financial ruin. I was about to walk out the door in my humble cafe uniform, but I was going to Central Bank. I was ready to trade my apron for a briefcase and turn the tables. Trump card secured. Ethan arrived exactly on time, suit pressed, arrogance high. He had no idea the low-level waitress had spent the night dissecting his financial assumptions. He thought this was a formality, I knew it was his execution. I had the truth, and he had the lie. The showdown was set. But how would Harold react when he realized his deceased wife, Ruth, was the true savior of golden mornings, and the architect of his son's destruction? Ethan had Harold cornered, pen in hand, signing away his future. But before the ink could dry, I burst back in. I wasn't the waitress, I was the lawyer's shadow. I slammed the trust documents onto the table, directly over Ethan's worthless papers. "Stop, Grandpa. You can't sign that. And Ethan, you can stop your hostile acquisition right now." The room went silent. Ethan looked at me with cold fury, then at the document header, the Ruth K. Harrison Family Trust. Hostile acquisition stopped. Ethan grabbed the document, his lawyer brain processing the facts instantly. He realized his catastrophic mistake. The cafe was protected by an ironclad legal shield he was too arrogant to uncover. I watched the confidence drain from his face, replaced by pure, panicked shock. This is a forgery. It's decades old. It's irrelevant," he sputtered. I pointed to the bank stamp and the notary seals. "It's real, Ethan. It was always real. You underestimated a dead woman and a waitress." His corporate facade shattered. Arrogance leads to ruin. Harold stood up, his trembling hands suddenly steady. The fear was gone, replaced by the peace I had fought for. He finally understood that Ruth, his wife, had silently protected him from his own son. He didn't speak to Ethan, he just took my hand. "My wife was always smarter than everyone else," he said, his voice full of quiet pride. Ethan's scheme had failed entirely. The land was safe. Harold was safe. The relief was a tidal wave, washing away months of fear. Ruth's silent victory. The bitter part of success immediately followed. My parents, realizing Ethan's failure meant no easy money, turned their fury on him, not me. "How could you miss this, Ethan? A trust." They were disappointed in the lost fortune, not the betrayal of their father. I walked away, retreating behind the counter. I had saved the cafe and Harold, but I had lost my family forever. The triumph felt heavy, stained by the cold reality of my parents' greed. Bittersweet triumph. Ethan didn't even acknowledge me as he gathered his worthless papers. He knew I had one. He left quickly, his corporate armor permanently damaged. The cafe was safe, but the family was broken. I realized my fight wasn't over, it was just changing focus. Harold needed more than just legal protection now. The true revenge would be to not just save the cafe, but to make it thrive on my own terms, proving all of them wrong. What daring plan would Gracie enact to turn Golden Mornings into a global empire? Ethan had vanished, but the stench of greed lingered. My parents were still shouting, not about Harold's well-being, but about the lost windfall the trust had blocked. Their fury was ugly and completely self-serving. I watched them with a strange sense of detachment. The shock had worn off, replaced by cold clarity. They were so consumed by the belief that Ethan's corporate talent trumped my quiet devotion, they missed the entire point of family. Greed still lingers. I finally cut through their noise, my voice low but firm. The cafe is safe. Harold is safe. And you are done here. My mother tried to pull the old manipulative routine, but darling, we're family. We just wanted to help. I met her gaze. No longer the timid daughter. No, you wanted a payday. This is Harold's home, not your investment. If you harass him again, I will personally ensure the trust's legal team files a restraining order. The threat was real. They stared, silenced by my newfound power. Restraining order threat. They left without a word to Harold, only a cold glance back at me. It hurt, but the pain was distant. The betrayal had already severed that connection. I realized that saving Harold meant letting go of the toxic illusion of my original family. My revenge wasn't just defeating Ethan, it was choosing my true family, the one built on genuine care, not legal loopholes or shared DNA. I cleaned the table, removing the last traces of their corporate filth. Choosing true family. I received one final communication from Ethan later that day, a curt, typed message simply stating, "I won't be back. Congrats. Not an apology. Not even a proper curse. Just the professional acknowledgement of a lost transaction. He had instantly compartmentalized the familial destruction into a business loss. I deleted the message. There were no more ties, no more rivalry, just a shared, bitter history. The final blow wasn't the trust, it was the realization that I had never truly known him. Lost twin connection. Harold was sitting in his usual spot, reading the newspaper. The tension had vanished from his shoulders. He looked up, his eyes clear. "Well," he said, a genuine smile replacing the stress lines. "It looks like we can go back to making coffee." That simple statement, the return to normal, was the ultimate victory. He was not just legally safe, he was emotionally free. I poured him a fresh cup. The cafe was a sanctuary once more. Return to sanctuary. I looked around the cafe, no longer seeing just a job, but a legacy, a legal obligation, and a home. The challenge was over, but the work was just beginning. Ethan wanted to see me fail. My parents wanted to forget my existence. The only true revenge left was to build something magnificent from the foundation Grandma Ruth had secured. I was no longer the girl who needed saving. I was the one who saved the golden mornings. Building the legacy, I picked up my apron, the symbol of the waitress they all mocked. Now, the apron represented my victory, my knowledge, and my unwavering loyalty. I had fought a corporate shark with nothing but heart in a dusty ledger, and I had one. My story wasn't about the money Ethan craved, it was about the indefinable value of family and devotion. I had chosen my side and sealed my destiny. Devotion is victory. My revenge was quiet. It wasn't about shouting or public displays of wealth. It was the simple, legal dismantling of an arrogant plot, executed by the person they least expected. I wasn't just working the counter anymore, I was safeguarding the trust, managing the assets, and planning the future expansion. Ethan taught me that business is a battlefield, and I learned to fight with quiet, devastating precision. Quiet precision wins. I glanced at a framed photo of Grandma Ruth on the shelf. Her eyes held the same quiet determination I now felt. She had seen the greed in her own family long ago and built the ultimate defense. I was simply executing her plan. She had built the legal weapon. I provided the final, quiet blow. My life had changed forever, not by escaping a bad family, but by embracing the legacy of the good one. Embracing the legacy. The bell chimed, signaling the start of a new, truly golden morning. I stood ready to greet the day, the coffee, and my grandfather. The corporate shark was defeated. But my journey from waitress to legacy protector had just begun. Where did Gracie's new financial power lead her next, and how did she truly make Golden Mornings a global empire? A week after the corporate duel, Harold formally handed the reins to me. He placed the heavy brass key and the ancient ledger of Ruth's trust on the counter. "It's yours now, Gracie. Run it the way you fought for it." His trust was the only inheritance I truly valued. My first act as the new owner/manager was to upgrade our equipment and implement the financial controls I learned during my night studies. The waitress was now the CEO, treating a small cafe like a serious, growing enterprise. Waitress becomes CEO. I brought a professional intensity to everything. I computerized the inventory, optimized supplier contracts, and implemented a strict, modern accounting system to replace Harold's loose methods. I was building a fortress, not just a coffee shop. Every decision was rooted in the knowledge that Ethan was waiting for me to slip up, and I would not. I had turned family revenge into a business model, ruthless efficiency combined with unwavering dedication. Ruthless efficiency. With the legal protection of Ruth's trust, the possibilities were endless. My mission was no longer just survival, it was expansion. I started sketching out a new logo and planning the first franchise location in the next town over. I was taking Golden Mornings global, a monument to the strength of two women, my grandmother and myself, who refused to be underestimated. My final revenge on Ethan wouldn't be his failure, but my impossible success. But how did Gracie finance her global takeover? And what did Ethan do when he saw her first expansion site? 6 months later, I secured the perfect location for my first expansion, a high-traffic corner lot, right across the street from the corporate tower where Ethan worked. It was pure strategic pettiness. I made sure the signage was enormous: Golden Mornings EST 1952 new location. I waited. Soon enough, Ethan passed by. He froze, recognizing the familiar golden script. I watched from a distance as the realization dawned on his face. I hadn't just saved the cafe, I was launching an empire. Empire launch spot. He came storming into the original cafe, demanding to know how I financed the expansion. Where did a waitress get the capital for commercial property, Gracie? Did Harold secretly mortgage the place? He was desperate to find a new loophole. I smiled, calm and professional. I used the residual investments from Ruth's trust, Ethan. Grandma Ruth, the brilliant businesswoman you overlooked, set up accounts decades ago, accounts that were completely liquidated, providing the exact seed money I needed. The ultimate chess move, Ruth's foresight funded my success. Ruth's investment pays. Ethan tried to argue the legality, but I cut him off. I know the law, Ethan. Better than you, apparently. I've secured the title and the necessary permits. This meeting is over. You are neither my lawyer nor my family. I returned to my laptop, reviewing spreadsheets. He was a distraction I no longer needed. My silent signal was clear: he was beneath my professional attention. He realized he couldn't bully, manipulate, or legally entrap me anymore. Dismissed by CEO. I saw the flash in his eyes, a painful mixture of resentment and, horrifyingly, a flicker of professional respect. He hated that the sweet little waitress had beat him on his own terms. But he couldn't deny the efficiency of my execution. He knew he'd been outmaneuvered, not by luck, but by superior strategy. He turned and walked out, his polished suit hiding a shattered career and an even more shattered ego. That was the last I ever saw of him. Ego is shattered. The cafe settled into a new, efficient rhythm. Harold, liberated from the stress, was happier than I'd seen him in years, finally enjoying his retirement behind the counter. My relationship with my parents never healed, some betrayals are terminal. But I had Harold, and the cafe, which was more than enough. We built our own small, powerful family unit, bonded by loyalty and the sheer audacity of our quiet victory. New family unit. The legal battles were done, the family was estranged, and the legacy was safe. My quiet revenge was complete. I proved that the greatest power isn't a law degree or inherited wealth, but sheer, strategic determination. But even with Ethan defeated and the cafe thriving, was Gracie truly done with revenge, or would she use her new empire to deliver one final, crushing blow to her parents? The cafe was truly silent now. No corporate shouting, no legal threats, just the hum of the refrigerator. I sat with Ruth's ledger, the artifact that changed everything. I realized that my need for revenge, while satisfying, wasn't the core of my action. It was simply the fuel that pushed me past my own fear. My real motivation was the simple, fierce need to protect the only person who had ever protected me. The quiet peace was the true reward. Peace is the reward. I studied Ruth's elegant handwriting in the ledger. It wasn't just about money, it was a testament to a deep, pragmatic love. She saw the greed in her children early on and built a legal wall to protect her husband's happiness. Ruth didn't create the trust to make a fortune, she created it to preserve a life. I was her legacy, not just in business acumen, but in the choice to prioritize human value over corporate profit. I finally understood who I truly was. Preserving a life. I used to define myself by their labels: the waitress, the quiet one, the failure. Ethan's attempted destruction forced me to redefine myself. I was the strategist, the inheritor of Ruth's wisdom, the protector of Harold. I was the true strength in a broken family, not the weakest link. The battle against Ethan wasn't just for the cafe, it was a crucible that forged my true identity. I didn't need their approval anymore. Forging true identity. I closed the ledger and carefully locked it away. The time for reflection was over. The time for building had begun. My revenge was finished because my purpose had shifted from retaliation to creation. I wasn't going to waste my energy on their anger, I was going to use my focus to expand Ruth's legacy. The final victory wouldn't be Ethan's downfall, but the sight of Golden Morning's thriving, proving that ethics and dedication always triumph over corporate greed. Creation over retaliation. I turned off the lights, leaving the cafe bathed in the quiet moonlight. The chapter of family betrayal and revenge was truly closed. My life wasn't defined by my parents' failure, but by my own success. I had saved the heritage. But how far did Gracie's new empire truly stretch, and would the former corporate shark, Ethan, ever attempt to reclaim his lost kingdom? The day of the first franchise opening was spectacular. I stood on the corner, no longer in my old apron but in a sharply tailored suit. We cut the ribbon, and the crowds poured in. Golden Mornings was no longer a symbol of financial stress, it was a beacon of local success and quiet rebellion. I had proved that dedication and ethics could beat corporate greed. I scanned the crowd. My parents and Ethan were nowhere to be found. Their silence was my final, greatest applause. Success is the applause. I unveiled the new logo. The old, faded script was replaced with a modern, clean design featuring a simple coffee bean intertwined with a small, elegant rose, Ruth's favorite flower. This wasn't just a rebrand, it was a rededication. This new symbol, I announced, represents the strength of our past and the commitment to quality of our future. Every cup of coffee served would now be a subtle, daily reminder of the woman who protected this legacy. Rose is the new symbol. Harold stood beside me, beaming. He didn't need to wear an apron to feel valuable anymore. Gracie, he told me later, quietly, you didn't just save the cafe, you saved me from them. You reminded me who Ruth was, and who I was. His words were the ultimate validation. I hadn't been motivated by hate, but by a deeper, purer form of love. The revenge against Ethan was merely the catalyst. The true victory was Harold's restored dignity. Dignity is restored. I looked across the street at Ethan's corporate tower. He was a footnote now, a cautionary tale. He taught me the tools of the financial world, which I then used to destroy his standing. The revenge wasn't personal anymore, it was structural. I had exposed the hollowness of his success. I hoped he was somewhere learning that true value is built on foundations deeper than quarterly reports. I owed him nothing but the knowledge that his own arrogance was his undoing. Hollowness exposed. My focus shifted entirely. I spent my days training my new franchise owners, instilling in them not just the recipe for the perfect brew, but the ethical standard of Golden Mornings. This business was built on integrity, not exploitation. I saw myself, no longer the timid girl, but a successful businesswoman and a protector of the family name. My final victory was the daily reality of a thriving, ethical empire. Ethics is the foundation. I turned off the lights, leaving the cafe bathed in the quiet moonlight. The chapter of family betrayal and revenge was truly closed. My life wasn't defined by my parents' failure, but by my own success. I had saved the heritage. But who were the next sharks that Gracie would face as her empire continued to grow globally, and what was her final, true destiny? 6 months into the franchise's success, the phone still rang occasionally. My mother's name flashed up. My parents had tried to reconcile, not out of love, but because they needed my newfound financial stability. I let it ring. The truth was, the betrayal had created a permanent chasm. I had moved on to boardrooms and balance sheets. They were stuck in the petty disappointment of their lost inheritance. I couldn't answer because there was nothing left to say. The daughter they wanted was dead. Chasm is permanent. Ethan's fallout was more public. His name appeared in a minor business news headline: "Legal consultant fails to deliver, terminated from firm." His arrogance was his poison. By underestimating me, he didn't just lose the cafe deal, he shattered his reputation. In the corporate world, that's a death sentence. I felt no triumph, only a detached sense of justice. My victory didn't feel personal anymore, it felt like a market correction. The lie he built had finally collapsed under the weight of the truth. Arrogance is poison. I kept one old photo, me and Ethan as kids, identical in matching sweaters, innocent. That shared past, that twin connection, was the only thing I truly mourned. We were two branches from the same trunk that had grown in entirely opposite directions. Ethan chose greed, I chose loyalty. The revenge separated us permanently, but the split wasn't the victory. The acceptance of the loss was. I covered the photo with a modern, clean spreadsheet of the cafe's latest profits. The future covered the past. Accepting the loss. My parents' letters weren't about love, they were about blame. If only you hadn't interfered, Ethan would have figured out a way. You ruined his career. They truly believed the lie was better than the hard-fought truth. They never apologized to Harold, they apologized for their lost payday. I finally understood that the revenge was necessary not for them to learn a lesson, but for me to escape the cycle of their emotional manipulation. I shredded the letter. The price they paid was self-inflicted isolation. Escaping the cycle. Harold walked in, bringing me a fresh-baked rose-shaped shortbread, a nod to Ruth and the new logo. "Don't worry about them, sweetie," he said, sensing the residual tension. "You have your own path now." In his gentle, unconditional acceptance, I found the true definition of family, a bond created by choice and mutual respect, not genetics. I was a woman who had lost her blood family but gained a legacy and a genuine home. The cafe wasn't just a business, it was a chosen fortress. Chosen fortress. I looked at the expansion plans spread out on the counter. The corporate world had taught me ruthlessness, but Ruth taught me purpose. I would use the financial power I now controlled not for petty vengeance, but for good, to build jobs, support local suppliers, and maintain the ethical standard my grandmother established. This wasn't just a business story. It was a declaration that wealth can serve morality, not corrupt it. Wealth serves morality. My old goals, to prove them wrong, were crossed out. My new goal was simple: grow Ruth's legacy. Protect Harold's peace. That focus was a shield against any lingering bitterness. The greatest punishment for my parents and Ethan wasn't financial ruin, it was seeing the timid, failed daughter not only survive their attack but transform into a successful, ethical empire builder. My flourishing was their permanent, psychological defeat. Flourishing is defeat. I remembered the day Ethan stormed out, his face a mask of shocked arrogance. I had delivered the ultimate final blow, the truth. He tried to sell a lie, I sold integrity. He sought power, I found purpose. The space he occupied was now filled with coffee sacks and fresh-baked bread, productive, honest labor. I had cleansed the cafe of his influence. There were no ghosts, just a clean slate and the promising smell of a better future. Clean slate achieved. I poured Harold his perfect black coffee, just as I had on the morning of the confrontation. The routine was the same, but the context was entirely different. That first cup was an act of quiet desperation, this one was an act of profound. Shared success. I came to the cafe seeking refuge, I ended up finding my fortune and my true family. The loop was closed. The waitress had saved the family legacy and became the new matriarch. Matriarch is formed. I held the keys to my new franchise, the cold brass a promise of future battles. The family fallout was complete, but the corporate expansion was just starting. Was this true finality, or would Gracie's success drag her back into her family's toxic orbit for one last confrontation? Life at the original cafe felt rich and grounded. The community knew the whole story, the corporate greed, the legal battles, my win. And they rallied around us. My loyal customers weren't just patrons, they were my witnesses, my cheerleaders. I no longer felt like the quiet, insignificant waitress. I was Gracie, the woman who fought for her family and won. Their smiles, their daily orders, were the ultimate reassurance that I had chosen the right side. This was where true wealth resided, in trust and shared history. True wealth and trust. Harold spent his days sharing stories and occasionally taste-testing a new pastry. He was retired in name, but still the heart of the place. I caught him watching me, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He nodded, a small, knowing gesture. It said, "You made your Grandma Ruth proud." That nod was worth 1,000 I love yous from my biological parents. He was the anchor I needed, the living proof that my revenge had been fundamentally an act of preservation, not destruction. Preservation, not ruin. I made sure my staff, who had stayed loyal through the entire ordeal, were well taken care of. At our next staff meeting, I announced significant raises and better benefits. I ran golden mornings the opposite way Ethan would have, with respect and fairness. "We are a team, built on trust and integrity," I told them. They cheered. This was my new army, dedicated not to corporate conquest, but to ethical quality. I was building my legacy not just on coffee, but on good leadership. Leadership by ethics. I signed a major new contract with a local bean supplier, a multi-year deal. I negotiated it myself, meticulously reviewing every clause. Ethan's dark lessons hadn't been wasted. I realized I was no longer dependent on anyone for validation or protection. My confidence wasn't inherited, it was forged in legal fire. I was the master of my own fate, running the cafe, the trust, and my life with an iron will hidden behind a smile. The girl who needed saving was long gone, the CEO had emerged. Master of my own fate. Harold and I raised our coffee mugs, his with his usual black brew, mine with a new seasonal latte. We toasted to Ruth, to family, and to the future. I knew my life would forever be a testament to the power of loyalty over blood. I had earned my success, my home, and my peace. The revenge was a painful lesson, but the rebuilding was the reward. But what happened when Gracie's fame grew, and a major national chain tried to buy out Golden Mornings outright? Would she fight for her legacy one last time? The small, local revenge story became a national business success. I stood here, in front of our 5th franchise location, which I proudly named Ruth's Rose. It was a tribute, a permanent reminder of the woman whose wisdom saved us all. My life now revolved around mentorship, supply chain ethics, and strategic planning. The world saw a successful CEO. I still saw the waitress who fought for her home, only now I was building a much bigger one. The shadow of my twin no longer haunted my success. Building a bigger home. I leveraged my corporate training to do things the right way. I established direct trade relationships with coffee farmers, ensuring fair wages and sustainable practices. This was my personal revenge on the ruthless, profit at all costs mentality of my twin. I proved that integrity could scale. My business model was the inverse of Ethan's life philosophy. The headlines called it savvy marketing. I called it the fundamental principle of Ruth's trust, decency. Integrity can scale. Harold was living his golden years exactly as Ruth intended, in peace and comfort. He didn't travel the world, but he loved his garden, his books, and his frequent video calls with me. He was the gentle king of his domain, completely safe. His laughter, heard clearly over the phone lines, was the sound of my success. He never once asked about Ethan or my parents. His focus was entirely forward. On the next coffee blend, the next franchise opening. His peace was my ultimate shield. Peace is the shield. I occasionally heard whispers about Ethan. He was working for a smaller, struggling firm, still bitter, still blaming others. He had a law degree and a legacy of money. I had a high school diploma and a legacy of loyalty. His legacy was a cautionary tale of greed. Mine was a blueprint for ethical triumph. I didn't seek his ruin. I simply built something so undeniably good that it exposed the hollowness of his corporate life. I wasn't defined by my twin's shadow, but by the light of my grandmother's purpose. Light over shadow. My family now included my franchise owners, my key managers, and the countless small business partners I supported. They were the people who believed in the Golden Morning's vision. This chosen family offered unconditional support and celebrated my success without resentment. The greatest part of my revenge wasn't taking something away from my parents, but the freedom to choose my own people. I had built a legacy that was sustainable, ethical, and, most importantly, loved. Freedom to choose. Looking back, I realized the whole story wasn't really about revenge. It was a test. A test of character, loyalty, and determination. The money, the cafe, the empire, they were just the scoreboard. What truly mattered was the person I became. I went from being a victim of my family's low expectations to the architect of my own ethical success. My greatest victory was proving to myself that I was worthy of Ruth's trust. Worthy of the trust. I wore a delicate rose-shaped pendant, a gift from Harold for the 5th store opening. It was small, but its significance was immense. It symbolized the unbreakable connection forged through shared struggle. I had traded the toxicity of blood for the solidity of genuine love. The end of the revenge story was the beginning of my true life. There was no more waiting, no more anxiety, only the quiet, powerful confidence of a woman in full control. Full control achieved. I wasn't just Gracie, the waitress. I was the CEO, the founder, the protector. My parents' attempts to crush me had only refined me. Ho muon mot dan tieng jia din, toi de zay dung mot di san lao dai. I had survived my twins' greed, surpassed my parents' low expectations, and fulfilled my grandmother's faith. The story of the family revenge was a closed book, its final chapter titled, The New Beginning. Legacy is lasting. The phone rang, a report on a major national chain attempting to move into my market. A challenge. The old Gracie would have panicked. The new Gracie smiled. The thrill of strategic warfare was still in my blood, but now it was for honest expansion. Not survival. I was ready for the next phase of the game, one where I was the main player, not the pawn. Main player now. This is where my revenge story truly ends, with the quiet satisfaction of a life built on solid ground. I reclaimed my power, I honored my grandmother, and I defined my own success. But now that the external fight is done, what personal choices does the CEO make? Will she ever risk love, or will her fortress of success remain forever isolated? I attended the college graduation of one of my first franchise owners, a young woman named Clara. She used her profits to pay for her degree in business ethics, a course of study that felt profoundly appropriate. Gracie, she told me, you taught me that true success is about doing good, not just doing well. I saw Ruth's spirit in Clara's eyes. My legacy wasn't just the stores, it was the chain of ethical leaders I was creating. The original, toxic inheritance was replaced by a nourishing culture of growth. Ethical leaders rise. I often reflected on the initial desire for revenge. It was born from pain, but it matured into purpose. The true meaning of the revenge wasn't the loss my family suffered. It was the radical self-definition I achieved. I had fought to save a physical place, but I ended up saving my soul. The whole, brutal battle was just the universe's complicated way of forcing me to become the best version of myself. I was grateful for the clarity the conflict brought. Self-definition found. I visited the original Golden Mornings. The little cafe, the birthplace of my empire, felt sacred. Harold was still there occasionally, welcoming customers. I ran my hand over the countertop where I used to scrub spills. I felt Ruth's presence, not as a ghost, but as a deep, ingrained value. She hadn't just left me a business, she left me a moral playbook. This was the true inheritance, a code of conduct that no one, not even Ethan, could touch. Moral playbook inherited. I once started writing a letter to my parents, detailing my success, perhaps hoping for a final, genuine apology. I ripped it up. The need for their acknowledgement was long gone. The chapter was closed with a certainty that required no further dialogue. My life was defined by the people who chose to support me, not the people who were obligated to love me. The pain had faded, leaving behind the hard, beautiful clarity of a life fully lived on my own terms. The family legacy now belonged to me alone. Dialogue is unnecessary. The story of Gracie and the family betrayal ends here, not with fireworks of revenge, but with the quiet blooming of a rose, a symbol of the life I built from the ruins. I had secured the future, honored the past, and defined my own success. But for every CEO, there is a next challenge. Does Gracie's ethical empire survive the inevitable political and market battles, or does a new, ruthless force finally crush the rose? So, what's the ultimate lesson from Gracie's revenge? It's not about the eye for an eye. It's about recognizing when blood ties become toxic chains. True strength isn't the ability to destroy your enemies, it's the power to rebuild yourself with superior materials, integrity, loyalty, and purpose. If you are battling family betrayal, remember, your worth is not determined by their acceptance. Your worth is defined by your choices when no one is watching. Worth is in choices. Every family has a story. Some are legacies of love, others are cautionary tales of greed. Tell me, what did you think was Gracie's riskiest move? And what is the one thing you would take away from her journey of turning betrayal into triumph? Don't let Gracie's story end here. Hit that like button if you believe loyalty trumps blood, and share this with someone who needs to hear a true triumph story. We've got another wild tale of family drama coming up next, a sibling rivalry over a multi-million-dollar tech startup. Who do you think will win that tech war, the ethical founder or the ruthless, backstabbing investor? At its heart, Gracie's story is a manual for surviving toxic family dynamics. It teaches us the critical difference between blood ties and chosen loyalty. Here's lesson 1. You are not obligated to accept abuse, even if it comes from your own blood. She chose self-respect over reconciliation. Lesson 2. True inheritance is not measured in currency, but in character. Ruth left Gracie integrity, which was worth far more than the millions Ethan sought. The battle was won in the courtroom, but the victory was achieved in her soul. Self-respect is key. Gracie taught us that revenge is best served by building a better life than the one your enemies tried to destroy. Lesson 3. Your best revenge is your own success built on ethical foundations. She proved that decency can scale, something her brother's greed never allowed him to see. Lesson 4. You have the power to redefine your own legacy. She wiped the slate clean of their name and built an empire founded on Ruth's values. You are the author of your next chapter, start writing it now. Redefine your story. And the final lesson, Lesson 5. The permanent cost of freedom is sometimes the loss of toxic ties. Embrace that peace. What major life lesson did you get from this journey? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Embrace the peace.